Our older children just returned home from Camp Ramah, and when we picked them up from camp, we hadn't seen them in 4 weeks. And so we expected 2 children to immediately jump into our arms, thrilled to be home. But they looked at us and looked at each other and said, "How soon can we go back?" We were hurt, but we understood. Because summer camp, and in particular Jewish summer camp, offers something magical that's seemingly hard to find anywhere else. Because at camp there is ample room and ample time to explore what it means to be Jewish. Whether it's speaking Hebrew or debating Jewish questions, telling Jewish jokes, learning daily prayers, our children spend several weeks exploring what it means to have a Jewish identity. Now, Jewish summer camp, if you will, is a spiritual island tucked away. It's a bubble that's hard to leave. But it is a bubble that we know that one can't remain in forever. Rabbi Sherman, Rabbi Taff, Rabbi Kornsgold, and I, we've all spent summers as campers, as counselors, as unit heads, as rabbis in residence at Jewish summer camp. In fact, many rabbis, including our beloved Rabbi Wolpe, began their journey into the rabbinate at Camp Ramah, engaging in pivotal, life-altering theological conversations. And many of you know that our beloved Rabbi Dershowitz was someone who founded Camp Ramah, one of the beginning directors to ensure that this place exists for thousands and thousands of Jewish children. But almost every single rabbi asks themselves the same question: how can we bring just a little bit of camp? How can we bring back just a little bit of that Jewish magic back into the synagogue, back here in shul? And if you ask any camper, they'll tell you the same answer: you can't replicate camp. But I do think that we can take some of the spiritual ingredients found at camp and here at home fashion the essence of Jewish living. The taste of Jewish life certainly intensifies at camp, but we have to remember that it's just a taste. Jewish living is meant to be savored long after that bus pulls out of the parking lot in Ojai or on the East Coast in the Poconos Mountains. Now, some of you know that baking is one of my favorite pastimes. I'm not great at it, I admit it, but I enjoy it. And due to our eclectic refrigerator, I'm constantly replacing ingredients. So if a recipe calls for oil and I don't have oil, then I usually put in applesauce. Or if something calls for baking soda, I figure it out, put something else in. Well, I think it's very similar. Whether you're leaving a camp experience or a Shabbaton or a retreat, we may never have that exact recipe, the exact recipe to replicate that shared, immersive Jewish experience. But I do believe that if we have just a few of the essential ingredients, when it comes to Jewish transformation, it might just be enough to move your soul. So I want to share a little bit my recipe for Jewish living. I think it begins with rest and appreciation. Taking a break from our phone or our iPad or our Apple Watch. Choosing to go for a walk. Drinking in God's beauty right in the middle of our own neighborhood. How many of us travel around the world and we see the most glorious sunrises and sunsets and we say to ourselves, here, it's on the other side of the world in which I just found God's presence. But I actually think we are meant to find God even when we hear the traffic and the blaring sirens on Wilshire Boulevard. Rest and appreciate. Stop and cherish. Pause and value. Ceasing from the monotony of daily life and carving out time to see God's blessings. seeing God's blessings when we're often just too busy to notice. In other words, I believe that one essential ingredient in Jewish living is making space for Shabbat. Now, what we're told is that Shabbat shouldn't taste like the rest of the week. There's a fantastic story in the Talmud where there is an exchange between the Roman emperor speaking with Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah. And the emperor says to him, I don't understand. All throughout the city on Shabbat, I smelled this delicious fragrance. How is it possible that the food cooked before Shabbat is able to spread this incredible smell? And the rabbi turns to him and says, for Shabbat, we cook with a special spice, but the spice only activates when it's for Shabbat. But when it's cooked during the rest of the week, you can't smell a thing. Now, that exact same passage shares a series of rabbis explaining what they make on Shabbat. I think that's fantastic that the rabbis of the Talmud had their menus of cooking. And so what I think it says to us is our tradition is clear. It doesn't matter what you make on Shabbat. You might serve pizza. You might serve tadig. You might serve chicken noodle soup. And I'm not even suggesting that there's exactly one place where you should pray, even though I think Sinai Temple is a fantastic place to pray. If we actively carve out a place, if we actively create a place on Shabbat where we step back and recall God's blessings in our lives, or moreover, carve out a space where we figure out how we can be a blessing unto God, then I think we have found the spice of Shabbat, one essential ingredient in Jewish living. A second ingredient on the list, Jewish joy, simcha. So because our kids were so angry to be home, they insisted that we go back to Camp Ramah last Sunday. And it was a fantastic experience because we had the opportunity to see our second session Sinai Temple campers, so many of your children and grandchildren. And what we witnessed were campers and counselors and unit heads and rabbis filled with Jewish joy. Why? Because we saw kids belting out Birkat Hamazon, the blessing after meals, yelling and singing at the top of their lungs. We witnessed children making mezuzot in Rowan's art room, enjoying and creating and decorating and laughing. And then we walked down to the bottom of the hill and we witnessed counselors teaching children traditional and modern Israeli dances. When you go to camp, the joy is palpable. It's as if you can touch it. Now, we often associate Jewish growth with solemn encounter. It doesn't mean that there is not place in Jewish living for the serious. Of course there is. But it also teaches us that joy and Jewish living, they should go hand in hand. But ask anyone, it's not that easy to experience joy. It's not something you can just turn off and turn on. So how does one experience joy? Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva, explains that we visualize life as but a means for joy and pleasure, as merely the medium. He says we spend so much time looking for things to make life worth living, but we have it all wrong. We fail to appreciate the most profound joy of all, life itself. In other words, Jewish joy is found when we make it a spiritual practice to check doubt and insecurity and judgment of others and ourselves at the door, and give ourselves the permission to see God in the here, to give ourselves permission to honor and be in the now. Joy is found when we settle the mind just enough to open the heart. And so my final ingredient this morning that I wanted to share with you is a ladder. Because at camp, I witnessed people holding each other up. Yoetzim, therapists and doctors ensuring the emotional safety of each child and counselor. The pairing of Eidot, the pairing of groups, 3rd grade with 8th grade, 4th grade with 9th grade. Counselors learning how to take on more responsibility, learning from older mentors, and unit heads gleaning wisdom from rabbis and teachers. At camp, there's a ladder of growth, encouraging others forward on a spiritual path, but there's also a ladder of support that catches you if you fall. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of a Hasidic Judaism, he was known for his famous long Shacharit morning services, long services. And so his followers would sit there and they would wait for him to finish praying, and they would grow weary and hungry. And so at one moment during the prayer service, one of the students, one of the more rebellious students, said to another, he won't even notice. Let's just get up for a moment, go get something to eat and drink, and we'll be back before he even finishes. He won't blink an eye. Well, as soon as the student began to stand up, the Baal Shem Tov let out a piercing cry. And the students looked at him and said, "Rebbe, what's wrong? What's the matter?" And he answered, "When I pray, it's as if I climb up a ladder, moving rung by rung to connect with God. And you, my disciples, you, my community, you hold the ladder. So when you got up, I fell." An essential ingredient, whether at camp or here at Sinai Temple, is to construct a ladder, supporting those who are actively climbing to ascend in holiness, and to construct a ladder to catch those who fall, those needing healing and love when they least expect it. The pause of Shabbat, Jewish joy, a ladder of growth and support, they're just a few ingredients. I could have added so many more this morning, but I think it's a start. It's the base of a recipe. I believe we trap ourselves into thinking that what we experience there can't possibly be experienced here. But Jewish flourishing shouldn't exist in a bubble. It shouldn't be stuck on a postcard with the greeting, "Wish you were here." We speak too often about Jewish diminishment instead of speaking about the ways in which we can create pathways for Jewish living, create pathways for Jewish thriving. The Camp Ramah motto, its theme is as follows: Ein od makom kemachane Ramah. There's no other place like Camp Ramah. And I believe that's true in so many ways. But when it comes to being a Jew, when it comes to Jewish living, Jewish thriving, we can choose to take some key ingredients, mix in a deep desire to nourish your soul, and repeat steps 1 and 2 over and over and over again. And I think when we do, we just might find that Jewish living is something we can taste. No. When we do, I think we just might find that Jewish living, that Jewish thriving is something we can savor all year long. Shabbat Shalom.